Okay, welcome. Project 1, I'm going to articulate it. Now, in the Project 1, DENT 1158, we had fabricated an occlusion rim in the classroom, and that occlusion rim we had used on our simulation articulation to give you the vertical dimension and centric occlusion record. Not all times that's necessary. If it's a Kennedy class 2 or 3 with a lot of dentition remaining, if we can approximate the occlusion to articulate it by hand, that's sufficient. I've also used some base plate wax here to lute the models together. I've seen elastics, I've seen sticky wax, I've seen many things, but I think a little bit of base plate wax is fine. I've also keyed the models. Unlike the Crown and Bridge keying, I've just taken an egg burr, a stone burr here, and made 3 different directional non-undercut grooves here so we can remount after processing, or if it should come apart during the wax up stage or setup stage. So another thing I took liberties doing after the occlusion rim comes back from the dental office, I will retrim the master models that I've left slightly a little thicker, therefore creating very close to parallel to the plane of occlusion the upper and lower models from both sides. And then when I articulate this, I will have also the plane of occlusion horizontal to the upper member. Now, this is a Kennedy Class 1 canine guided occlusion. It's not necessary per se to use a semi-adjustable articulator, although that would be that could work as well. We're going to use a plain line articulator, try to maximize contact and centric occlusion, and not really achieve any group function, as the canines will disclude the posterior teeth in excursions. So here's my plain line articulator. I've kind of overclosed it. I've got a set screw here that I'm going to overclose it beyond parallel or less than parallel. I'm not sure how much I'm going to close it depending on the plaster here. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up some plaster and articulate this. So once again, I've trimmed the models after the occlusion rim or after the bite was verified. Okay, I was just mixing some plaster. I'm back here now. Consistency, timing is the key, like most things in dental technology. If your plaster is too runny, it's not going to support the models. If it's too thick, it's going to be very hard to manage. And what I would do is also I'm going to add a little bit of water to the models to kind of break the surface tension and get a better bond, let's say, between the plaster and the stone. I'm going to put a small amount here. Let me get in the center of our picture. A small amount here on the table to support my articulator. And then add on top of that. Now again, displacement theory. I need to know how much I'm adding, how big the model is. Any excess will come out, but roughly that's enough. I'm going to put the model now, approximate it to the center. Again, I'm keeping Bonwell's triangle, even though it's a plain line articulator in mind, where we would have 110, which this plain line articulator is, and then 110 to the center, roughly. But like I said, we're not achieving any group function in this setup. Then I would add some on top, supporting with my left hand here, I'm right-handed, not to depress the models into the lower plaster. Kind of equally distributed around the top. Close my articulator. Add some plaster now to the top of this. And then at this time, I'm going to check the plane of occlusion on the lower. Make sure that the midline is in the center of the articulator. with a slight amount of moisture or water on my spatula, I'll smooth off the top parallel to the model, parallel to the plane of occlusion. And then hopefully my model is trimmed decently. I'll remove any excess around the top. This is going to go to the dentist for try-in, so I think presentation is key. I would generally try to, I can still adjust here a little bit. I'm a little off center. I'll move over to the left here. And I've got lots of time to do it again. There's many different creative ways of doing this. I like to keep the top flat and then taper the edges around. Maybe trim the back off here as well. Any excess. This remains kind of symmetrical with the model below. I can take a plaster knife and remove any excess flush with the base of the model on the lower. Now this model was trimmed flat at the front on the bottom. I would generally trim the model's indentures rounded. I don't have any angles to them. Easier for investing and just a presentation preference. And here, because it's trimmed flat, I've got slight exposure of the lower articulator, which I'm going to cover up. I don't want to expose the articulator. Take the leftovers. I'll go around the back and trim the leftovers. Any kind of voids at the back I'll fill in. I have a slight, it's not going to look the greatest at the front here. I guess if you're worried about the plaster setting, you could do the bottom first, but it's really expectation we do two at once. It's a lot of time saving. So I didn't really use fingers. I didn't use any water. If I could really go to town, if I wanted to use the wet sandpaper, smooth it off. But like I said, the patient's not going to be wearing the articulator. The articulator is really a tool to be used to facilitate me in maintaining this, plane of occlusion. That's why I like to have the plane of occlusion parallel with the top of the articulator and the base of the models. So if I don't lose kind of any reference of horizontal positioning. And then what we'll do is we're going to proceed to assess the occlusion now of the framework that we created for the lower, adjust the framework necessary, and then proceed to set up the teeth for trying. And then we will proceed to seal the flanges down and proceed to investing to finish. On your evaluation guide, number 1 is articulation out of the 10. It is important that the models are in the right position. The midline is centered down the midline of the articulator. We've maintained roughly Bonwell's triangle, or thinking about it. And these are good habits, even though it might be a one-tooth partial that you're articulating for some reason. Because this could be a full upper in your laboratory work placement scenario that you're not using a semi-adjustable articulator. You're just using the plain line articulator, so you should try to maximize, as simple of an instrument as it is, you should try to maximize all of its potential. Okay, so we'll reconvene for the setup.